Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. It's Paulie, Esther here, and I'm back from a couple days away with my family, and now I'm going to get you caught up on the Dead by Daylight news you may have missed. So last week there was a live stream. It was a Q&A session, and the community manager Peanits thankfully put together a transcript, so let's check it out. We're going to click over here onto the official Dead by Daylight forums, and here it says live Q&A recap from January 23rd. News and announcements. We will be at PAX East. There will be no booth, but we will have a Dead by Daylight party. Alright, so the first thing I want to say about this is I think that this is probably a key indicator. The next character in Chapter 15 is going to be an original, not licensed. And the reason why I say that is I think that if it were a licensed character, that there would be much more hoopla around it and they would have a booth at PAX. Might be wrong, but I think that the past indicators, they had a booth when Ash came out, and they had a booth when Stranger Things came out. The fact they're not having a booth this time makes me think that the next character is probably going to be an original killer. I could be wrong. Anyway, moving on. Lunar New Year event is on now. Log in this week for some exclusive charms, and next week for some exclusive cosmetics. There's a hotfix coming soon to the 3.5.0 patch. Known issues. Decisive Strike is not working with Madness skill checks against the Doctor. If you're facing a lot of Doctors, I just recommend that you take off Decisive Strike. If you're not facing too many Doctors, you maybe don't need to change your build and remove Decisive. It's up to you until that hotfix comes in anyway. Rank achievements unlocked at random, and you will not be banned if this happens. So you may have noticed if you logged into your game that you were granted rank 1 achievement killer, rank 5 achievement killer, and survivor, etc. If you didn't already have those, there was a bug that granted those achievements. They aren't going to be taken away from you, and you aren't going to be in trouble for having received those achievements. We've seen an increase in the rank update error. The Badham preschool map has been disabled temporarily due to collision issues. I recommend that you don't play any Badham offerings because they'll be lost, so just save those until we know that that map is turned back on. Matchmaking is being looked into, and we'll have a detailed blog post explaining the situation shortly. That blog post actually came out today. The video I'm going to make right after this one is going to be about the matchmaking blog post. And sound issues are being investigated. Dedicated servers and optimization are constantly being worked on. These changes are very technical, so they tend not to appear in the patch notes. Now, on to the question and answers. First, we started off with the topic of the archives. What were the takeaways from the first tome in the Rift? We've learned a lot from the first tome in the Rift. Completion time was a lot harder and longer than we anticipated. The goal was to have players complete the Rift by the time they complete the tome. Matchmaking and changes to the tome caused this to fall out of line with our plans. Challenge difficulty turned out to be harder than we had hoped. We reduced the difficulty of challenges for the latter parts of the first tome, and we have extended this to tome 2 as well. The overall difficulty increase in tome 2 is much lower between the levels. We've made changes to the layout of tome 2. Some of the harder challenges are now out of the way and optional, so reaching the end of a level of the tome is now easier. This means that you aren't blocked from finishing a level in the tome if you don't have a given character unlocked. Yeah, so going forward in tome 2, there's a clear path to complete each level without requiring certain characters or things like that. They do have some side quests that require characters like Jane Romero or the Spirit that you may not necessarily own. There are a lot of sales on to get those characters if you want them, but if you don't own the characters, you can't do those challenges. Thankfully, you don't need to do those challenges to complete the level, like a path from start to finish. So those are optional side quests. The other thing that they talked about here, the completion time. I'm keeping track of my time, how long it's going to take me to complete this, and I think I'm like level tier 15 already, just in the first week, so I do believe that I'll complete this tome 2, the Rift, much quicker than the first one, but remains to be seen. Alright, how were the characters chosen for tome 2? For tome 1, we tried to pick some of our oldest characters, and for tome 2, we picked a mix of characters that we felt had some interesting stories to tell, and going forward, we'll be picking characters that have something players want to know about. If these characters are DLC characters, we want to make sure that they are easily obtainable during the Rift. Any DLC characters required for this tome are currently on sale and can be alternatively purchased with iridescent shards. Will future tomes be focused around 4 characters as well? Our plans for the time being is to continue focusing on 4 characters, although this is not a hard set rule and is subject to change. From a gameplay perspective, this also means that there aren't as many people playing one specific character for the Rift progress as there's a greater variety of challenges. Yeah, like in Tome 1, the Trapper play was like through the roof because there were so many Trapper challenges. Will the archives ever focus on maps like they do on characters? A lot of maps have a bunch of small details scattered around them that already tell a story. Additionally, the characters that these maps are released with tend to be heavily tied to their killers, so a lot of the map's lore is covered in the killer's backstory. We aren't strongly against giving lore about the maps in the future, but for the time being, we'll be focusing on the story of killers and survivors. Next, we're going to move on to Hex Ruin and generators. What was the thought process behind the Ruin change? It started back in July of 2019. We realized that the old version of Ruin had very passive gameplay. If you ran the perk, you didn't have to do anything. Just having the perk equipped made the effect active. The old Ruin was also very consistent from moment to moment due to the random nature of skill checks. I think it's supposed to be inconsistent. If you did a generator and had no skill checks, Ruin would have no effect. Meanwhile, if you got unlucky and had a bunch of skill checks, it could be very punishing. We also wanted to help with the onboarding of new players, and we also noticed the expert players would just work through Ruin as if it wasn't there. We looked into a bunch of different possibilities, but we knew we wanted to keep the perk as a generator related hex. The original version that was tested was the same as the new version of Ruin, but also contained a flat reduction to repair speed, and after more testing we found this to be too much. Will other slowdown perks see changes as well? Over time, we would like these perks to be less effective when combined together, but instead more effective when run on their own. The new version of Hex Ruin is a good example of this. When Ruin is active, you cannot kick generators, so perks like Pop Goes the Weasel or Overcharge would be less appealing. If you are concerned that Ruin may be cleansed, you can take them as a backup, although they won't be active at the same time. Have you considered making Ruin a non-Hex perk? Since Hex Ruin is a Hag perk and all of the Hag's perks are Hex perks, it didn't seem right to make it a non-Hex perk. Additionally, if it was not a Hex perk, the effect would have to be lower, since you would not be able to stop it. Have you thought about keeping the no great skill check progress part of Ruin? This is something we've considered, but we can't commit to this just yet. If we find that the new Ruin does need some improvement, this is one of the things we would like to try. We want to wait and see how the new Ruin plays out first, though. Can you remove the notification survivors get when Ruin is active? The Hex perk system as a whole gives a survivor a notification whenever a Hex perk has a noticeable effect, so removing this notification would be inconsistent with other Hex perks. Additionally, an experienced player would know that Hex Ruin is active when the generator immediately starts regressing after they let go of the generator. Since you only get the notification when there's a visible effect, removing the notification would likely only make the game more confusing for newer players while having no effect on veterans. On that point, shouldn't we be unaware there's a lullaby until someone gets hooked? I don't know, just me anyway, because it says they don't tell you until there's a noticeable effect. So until somebody gets hooked, no noticeable effect for a lullaby, right? Anyway, are you looking into changing the base generator repair time? We're looking at possible changes to toolboxes at the moment, but the base generator repair time is not likely to increase. The amount of time survivors spend holding M1 on a generator is already fairly long, and we believe that there are other things we can do to increase match length rather than just making generators take longer. Rest assured, we are aware of concerns over map size and early game pressure. Will toolboxes be changing in the near future? Yes, we're looking into changing some toolboxes at the moment. We can't give any details since the changes aren't set in stone just yet, but we look forward to sharing more details as soon as we can. Are there any plans to adjust survivor generator perks accordingly? There are very few perks that affect generator repairs for survivors. Resilience, This Is Not Happening, and Prove Thyself. In spite of all these perks being free in the base game, their usage rates still remain very low, so we're not looking to change them at the moment. We've been sure to be careful to not make survivor perks affect generator repair speeds, which is why we're currently focusing on toolboxes instead. Are there plans for any secondary objectives? In the short term, it's unlikely that we'll see a brand new side objective appear. What is more likely is that we'd put more focus on the existing side objectives that we have, such as totems. Right now, there's a lot of emphasis on totems due to the increased use of No One Escapes Death, and we'd like to play into that some sort of gameplay, if anything. For now, we cannot promise anything. So when I first saw this live, the things that I was thinking of was, what if there was a perk that created more totems on the map, or what if there was an offering that created more totems on the map? So if people were running the offering with more totems, then that by itself would make survivors think they must have No One Escapes Death because they're adding more totems, so we better cleanse more totems to make sure there's no NOED, and you would go around finding all the totems, and that would slow down the gameplay because you would spend time looking for the totems rather than doing the generators, and then maybe you'd find out that the killer didn't even have NOED, and they had only put that in there to make you think that they wanted more totems so that they'd have a NOED active. You know what I mean? So an offering to add extra totems is kind of interesting to me. I'd like to see that. I don't know if this is something the devs have in mind, but it's just something that I thought of that would take emphasis off of generators and shift it more towards totems. So we'll see. But they do say that they want to increase focus on totems. So what else would that look like? Are you looking to improve some of the weaker perks? Yes, we're looking to change some of the weaker, lesser used perks. Here's a short list of the perks that we're looking to change in the near future. And at the top of the list, I'm pleased to see that they're going to buff the best perk in the game, Small Game. All right, so the list reads as Small Game, Cruel Limits, previously known as Cruel Confinement. Any Means Necessary, that's the pallet pickup perk. Slippery Meat, Vigil, This Is Not Happening, and Technician. We also have many more perks that we'd like to review when we get the chance. Will commonly used survivor perks receive the same treatment? I guess they mean as the same treatment as Ruin? I don't know. Fun fact, self-care is actually the most used survivor perk. You don't say. Some of these perks, while they are quite common, are not used nearly as much as Hex Ruin. Decisive Strike has already received a substantial cutback. We have read your concern over the more abusive uses for it, and we are considering what can be done to combat that. Surprisingly, Lithe is actually used more than Decisive Strike, more than Borrowed Time, and more than Adrenaline. Please keep in mind that the meta may be different between platforms, so this may not reflect your personal experiences. This doesn't mean that nothing will ever happen to any of these perks, but they are not going to be changed in the same initiative as Hex Ruin. While Self-Care is still the most used perk, it is not causing issues in the game, so we're not looking to change it at this time. Will Hex Totems ever get some sort of a respawn mechanic? It's not very likely. The concept behind Hex perks is that they have a very powerful effect, but can be destroyed. Devour Hope, for example, allows you to Mori people. If Hex perks were to respawn, they would have to have their power toned down to compensate. Will there be other generator slowdown perks in the future? It's not impossible that there will be more slowdown perks, but we're going to be very careful when it comes to creating new ones. Our goal is for loadouts of 4 slowdown perks to not be the meta anymore. For example, Ruin doesn't work with Pop Goes the Weasel very well, since you can't kick generators while Ruin is active. We would like to see diverse loadouts rather than loadouts solely focused on slowing generators. We expect that in the first few minutes of a match, roughly 2 generators will be done. It was never intended for all 5 generators to remain up for the first 4 minutes of a match. Sometimes you may want to let 1 or 2 very far generators go and instead protect a tight cluster of generators. Regen stratting! Now for the Doctor update. Why does snapping out of it reduce you to Madness 1 now? During testing, we found that the new Static Blast, it was very easy to get survivors into Madness Tier 3. By the time you could get somewhere safe and snap out of it, the Doctor's Static Blast would be nearly off cooldown, and that would leave you in an almost never-ending cycle of snapping out of it. Is there any chance snap out of it would be considered healing again? This is not something we're looking to do for now, since there's so many perks that affect healing. These perks would directly affect your power, making it very unreliable. The time taken to snap out of it could very easily become way too long or way too short, depending on the perks used. Why does snap out of it take priority over mending? The snap out of it interaction is meant to prevent any charging interaction, such as healing or repairing a generator. This was actually a question that came up with the team early on, and we ultimately decided that it should, but it's still open for debate. That I guess that means that snap out should take priority, but they may change that. Could a Survivor's Madness tier be made more clear to the killer? This is a good question and something we're still considering internally. The Survivor's Madness tier is shown on the status bar, but it can be hard to tell the difference between Madness 2 and Madness 3 tiers at the moment. We can't make any promises, but it's something we're considering. Why was Exhaustion removed from the Doctor's add-ons? We wanted to add the reverse skill checks to the Doctor's kit, but that meant we'd have to remove one of the existing afflictions to make room for it, and when we reviewed the different add-ons that were available, we realized that the Exhaustion add-ons were the ones that we liked the least. And what was the motivation behind adding a cooldown to Shock Therapy? Shock Therapy has always had a 2-second cooldown between shocks, although there was no delay before you could switch stances. Now that stances are no longer a thing, the cooldown may be a little more noticeable. The current cooldown of 1.5 seconds is longer than the 1 second that it took to switch stances, although your movement speed isn't slowed like it was before to compensate for that. The result should feel much better to play. Now, next section was Larry's update and maps. How was Larry's decided as the next map update? Larry's update happened to coincide nicely with the Doctor update, as it is his realm, but the map team has had their eye on Larry's for a while now. It was our first indoor map. Will other maps be seeing changes in the near future? Yes, we're continuing our initiative to update maps and address map balance issues. We're aware of the major culprits and we're working to remove those lamentable configurations from the entity's realm forever. There is quite a lot of content to review and we want to make sure we do it right, so it'll take a little while to get all of the quote-unquote bad seeds, but trust us, we are on it. Will the old version of the treatment theater still exist? No, all the assets have been completely redone and replaced with the exception of Moo Moo the cow. Moo Moo is still safe and with us. She's just sleeping. If you don't know who Moo Moo the cow is, there is a patient bed on one version of Larry's, at least, that has a cow, Moo Moo, sleeping. Yeah, we're going to go with sleeping in the bed. Was there ever plans to add a second floor to the treatment theater? We already have a completely 2-floor indoor map of the game, and we have an indoor map that has a lot of height variation in the Hawkins lab, so we want to preserve the diversity already established and keep Larry's as a mostly flat interior level. But we may visit other floors of Larry's in future map releases in this realm. That would be incredible. If they had a second variation of Larry's that was an entirely different floor, that's hot. Is there any chance some of the totem spawns will be revisited? Yes, we're continuing our initiative to update maps and address map balance issues. Those more open outdoor maps traditionally don't exhibit signs of major imbalances, so they haven't been a priority, but we are absolutely planning to hide totems better when we create a new map or update an old one. Personally, I know that Monto says you just put a chair in front of the totem, but as somebody who goes around sniffing for the totems, I can definitely say that the totems are hidden much better on the new Larry's. Is the treatment theater bigger or smaller than before? The map did not change in overall size as far as the number of tiles, but the shape of the map has changed. The original map was essentially a stubby rectangle. Words are hard. A stubby rectangle of 5 by 6, but the new map is 4 by 7. This was done to make it easier for players to orient themselves in the map and get less lost as a result. If the base game doesn't change, we'll be aiming at reducing map sizes overall. Although it leads to less map diversity, we can easily conclude that our game does not scale well with respects to map size. Miscellaneous questions. What was the hardest part of this update? This is a tricky one to answer since different teams worked on different parts of the update. The Doctor, for example, was rebuilt from the ground up using more efficient methods, while the map update required the art team to make a bunch of different assets. Will anything be done about the new quote-unquote hook tech? Yes, we're looking to fix hook tech. If you don't know what hook tech is, it's when a survivor is placed on the hook by the killer, another survivor crouches in behind that survivor, between the survivor on the hook and the hook, and sometimes when the killer sees you there and they swing, they'll hit the person on the hook instead of hitting you hiding in behind. This is what's called the hook tech. But I believe if the killer positions themselves and aims to swing at the base of the hook, the stand, that will hit survivor hiding behind. Has Dead Hard been changed on the PTB, and why was moonwalking removed in the PTB? Both of these are related to the movement extrapolation change when we tested it on the PTB. This change is pretty technical, but it basically makes movement feel better and better reflect the positions of players with latency. Removing moonwalking was not an intention of that change, it was just a side effect. I thought that the movement extrapolation change that was tested was amazing. Will the other killers be receiving secondary powers? And when I say amazing, it just felt like all of the window hits were fair and things like that. The hits felt fair in that testing that they had for positioning. Will other killers be receiving secondary powers? We may add secondary powers to killers when we update them if it's fitting, but it's not something we're planning to do across the board. For the Doctor, changing the static field into static blast felt right and gave the Doctor a lot more control over his power. Meanwhile, a killer like the Wraith has a very simple power, and having a secondary ability wouldn't make much sense. Are there plans to increase the base generator regression? The current base regression amount is about where we'd like it for now, but it's always possible that other things may affect how quickly generators regress in the future. Can killers spawn closer to their hex totems? This wouldn't be possible with the way maps are generated. The current map generator spawns the killer, spawns the survivors a certain distance away, then tries to place totems in locations that the survivors can't see them, and from there the hex perk picks a random totem. Using the totem closest to the killer would only work if the killer has only one hex perk, otherwise the future totems would eventually have to be used. Additionally, if you knew that the hex spawned close to the killer, the survivors would know to check the area that the killer came from to find their hex. When will the other killers receive new chase music? We're looking to add new chase music to the killers as we update specific killers. Yeah, this was something that they said that they want to continue to add chase music to each of the original killers anyway. Hopefully, love to get the Hello's Up music for the pig. I don't know if they can get that though, but I would love it. What was the inspiration behind the Doctor's new chase music? The theme of the Doctor's chase music was was based around emergency sounds and electricity. And let's see, I guess I got one more question that's not going to be on the screen. Everything's going to jump. Are the Gatekeeper changes working out as intended? It's too early to say for sure, as we only have 2 days worth of data. And please note the current text on the Gatekeeper emblem in-game does not reflect the new change, and we're planning to fix this in an upcoming hotfix. Okay, the only other thing I want to note here is, as far as the known issues, for the archives part, is if you have completed level 1 of your archives, you may notice that the bar on the side of your screen where you often check, see the XP that you're earning in each game that will give you those passive fragments. To get 1 rift fragment for every 800 XP, you may have noticed, completed level 1, that is no longer showing any data. And I inquired about this, and I'm told that it's only a visual bug, and that you are in fact still earning those rift fragments. And one way that you can check this for yourself is to just write down the number of XP that you get after every game, and then continue to add them up. And by the time we know that you need 800 XP to get 1 rift fragment, therefore you need 8,000 XP to get 10 rift fragments, which will tier you up. So as you're adding those games up from game to game of your XP, By the time you reach 8,000, you should see your tier level go up in the Rift. If it hasn't, then we have a problem. But I'm told it's just a visual bug and you're still earning your fragments. So, there'll be no cause for alarm. Alright, that's all I have for you today. I'm going to get this out and then we're going to talk about those matchmaking changes that they put out in a blog post today. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.